Well, for more on the Queensland LNP government's first budget, I'm joined now by state political reporter Chris O'Brien. Chris O'Brien, job cuts have been a big focus in the lead up to this budget. What more do we know about these job cuts and indeed how much they're going to cost the government?
You're right, Kim. They have been a very big focus. And I think when history looks back on this first non-Labor budget in Queensland since 1998, the job cuts will obviously be the fact that everybody remembers. 14,000 of them, as you spoke about, 10,600 redundancies. That figure has been floating around for a little bit of time now. What we've learned today is some of the dollars that go with that. First of all, as you can imagine, if you offer 10,600 redundancies, you've got to spend a bit of money to fund those redundancies, and it's going to cost the LNP government $800 million to do that. But they say it's going to be worth it in the end, because they say over the next 2 or 3 budgets, the savings from all those redundancies, Kim, will be $3.7 billion. And of course, savings is what it's all about for Tim Nicholls in this budget. And
do these job cuts mean that the unemployment rate in Queensland is expected to creep up?
Well, it will creep up. It'll be about 6% this year, but they do say it'll be down to about 5.75% next year. You actually raise an interesting point there, because to add to the colour and confusion of what's going on in the job cuts in the public sector, very distressing as it may be for those workers, and in fact even just today many of them are finding out for the first time, to add to that, the Premier and the Treasurer have said on some other occasions recently that once things turn around in the budget, they'll start hiring again. In fact, Queensland Health, which is bearing the largest share of the cuts, 4,140 of them being cuts in terms of full-time equivalencies, the Health Minister said that in future budgets he'll be hiring more frontline workers soon. So the overall impact on the unemployment rate may be relatively neutral, shall we say.
So basically the state government is trying to reassure Queenslanders that these drastic job cuts are going to be a one-off, if you like?
Well, I think they certainly hope so. Tim Nicholls has used language along those lines today. He has said that he hopes neither his government nor any government in the future ever has to do anything like this. That, of course, has a political tinge to it. The Labor Party, which was until recently in government in Queensland for those 14 years, believes that the LNP is overreacting today to the legacy that they left behind. The other big issue, of course, that's coming out of today that's going to cause a little bit of controversy is the coal royalties. You mentioned that. There's going to be an increase to 12.5%. When coal is earning $100 to $150 a tonne. It's going to be up to 15% at over $150 a tonne. The mining industry reacting very badly to that today because, Kim, they say just in the last couple of days some mining companies have announced job losses, and there could be a little bit of anger from Wayne Swan over this as well, because this goes to whether the states were permitted to increase royalties on the back of the mineral resources rent tax.
Chris O'Brien, let me ask, is there any sort of good news in this budget for Queenslanders? Because usually a budget is a time where a government might announce, you know, more teachers, more policemen, more fireys, that sort of thing.
Yes, we go searching for the trinkets, don't we, Kim? Not too many trinkets this year for obvious reasons. With a solemn expression, an austerity budget is handed down for the first LNP budget. But yes, there will be some increases in frontline positions. You're right there. There will be extra police on the beat. 1,100, I think, is the figure that they're promising there. And as I mentioned earlier, the Health Department is planning to put on more nurses and doctors. There's going to be an $80 water rebate for households in the southeast because of some changes coming up in terms of the structure of the water system in the southeast. And stamp duty, as you mentioned, has been increased in the threshold, although the rate will go up. But there's been a change to the first homeowners grant as well. Instead of $7,000 for a new home, you'll get $15,000 if you're building a new home. So not so many trinkets as in years gone by, but there are some.
And are we expecting any industrial action or indeed protests from unions in response to these, you know, as you've described it, as this austere budget?
not only specifically to the budget, but the overall public sector cuts in general are provoking a day of action tomorrow. So there will be activity left, right and centre. And I don't mean that politically, I just mean that geographically, because in quite a few places around Brisbane and elsewhere, there will be a day of action tomorrow.
And a final question, we always look for the budget bottom line. The government is confident that it's going to be able to get a little bit of a teeny surplus in a couple of years.
Yes, $17 million would be very handy to you and to me, but it is teeny for state governments, you're right. That's on the back of a $6.6 billion deficit this financial year. That's much bigger than expected because of some changes to revenue and expenditure, but turning around next year to a $17 million surplus if those figures come true.
Indeed. Chris O'Brien, Queensland political reporter, thank you for joining us live from Parliament House today.